Be'ezras Hashem, with Hashem's help, we begin another set of laws, the second one in book number 5, Hilchos, Maachalos, Asuros, the laws of forbidden foods. We've talked about forbidden relationships. Now we're moving to forbidden foods. These are going to actually occupy the next two sets of laws, because in this halachot we're going to be learning about the actual forbidden foods, and then in the next set of laws, which are called the laws of slaughtering, we're going to talk about the laws of preparing animals to be eaten. So they're both essentially about kosher, and that's how the Rambam classified this book. It's all the stuff which makes us holy, what we eat and who we're with, that makes the Jewish people holy as a nation. So as the Rambam always does, he begins with a list of the mitzvahs that are going to be discussed in this set of laws, and it's quite long. Yesh bichlalan shmeina ve'esri mitzvahs. Included in this set of laws is the discussion of 28 of the 613 mitzvahs. Arba mitzvahs aseh, only 4 positive commandments, ve'arba ve'esrim mitzvahs lois aseh, and 24 negative commandments. V'zehu pratan, and their details are as follows. Number 1, Aleph, livdaik b'simane behema v'chaya, lahavdil ben tmeya l'tahira. It's a biblical commandment, according to the Rambam, to check the signs on an animal or a beast to differentiate between an impure one and a pure one. Beis, livdaik b'simane ha'oif, lahavdil ben atami l'tahir. It's also a mitzvah to check the signs of a bird to differentiate between impure and pure, kosher, non-kosher. Gimel, livdaik b'simane chagavim, lahavdil ben tami l'tahir, to check, to differentiate between kosher and non-kosher locusts. Dalid, livdaik b'simane dagim, lahavdil ben tami l'tahir, to check the signs on fish, to differentiate between kosher ones and non-kosher ones. Those are the 4 positive commandments, and now the list of the negatives. Hey, shalei lechol behema v'chayo tameya. It's a prohibition to eat an animal or a beast that's non-kosher. Vav, shalei lechol oif tameh. It's a prohibition to eat a non-kosher bird. Zayin, shalei lechol dagim tameim. It's a prohibition not to eat non-kosher fish. Ches, shalei lechol sheretz ha'oif. Not to eat flying insects. The Rambam defines this tomorrow as flies, bees, hornets, mosquitoes. Tes, shalei lechol sheretz ha'aretz. Not to eat the teeming creatures of the land. The Rambam defines this as snakes, scorpions, beetles, centipedes, those kind of things. They crawl on the ground and they're able to reproduce on their own. Yud shalei lechol remes ha'aretz. Not to eat crawly creatures of the ground. The Rambam defines these as fruit that emerge from mold, from garbage. Yud Aleph shalei lechol telas haperes kishatetze la'avir. We're not allowed to eat worms that come about in produce or in fruit. Once they leave the fruit or the produce, they go to the open air. Yud Beis shalei lechol sheretz hamayim. Not to eat water insects. The Rambam defines these as a frog, even a seal, big creatures, small creatures, leeches, worms that live in the water. Yud Gimel shalei lechol nevela. Not to eat nevela. Nevela literally means a carcass, but it has a definition in halacha of any living being that died of natural causes and or was killed, not in the ritual way. Yud Dalet shalei lehanes b'sher aniskal. We're not allowed to benefit from what's called the stoned ox. Not the ox that drank too much. It's an ox that actually killed another person and needs to be stoned to death. You cannot have any pleasure from it. Tezvav shalei lechol treifa. Not to eat a torn animal. Torn literally means pounced on by an animal, but it has a halakhic definition of an animal which is terminally ill. It's not going to survive 12 months. Tezayin shalei lechol ever min hachai. Not to eat a limb from a living animal. Yud zayin shalei lechol dam. Not to eat blood. Yud ches shalei lechol chelev behema tahira. We're not allowed to eat the fats, certain fats in a kosher animal. The Rambam will define those in chapter 7. Yud tes shalei lechol gid hanasha. Not to eat the sciatic nerve. That's going to be defined in chapter 8. Chaf shalei lechol basar b'chalav. Not to eat milk and meat that was cooked together. Chaf aleph shalei levashlei. It's also a prohibition against cooking the milk and meat itself. Those 2 are the subject of chapter 9. Chaf beis shalei lechol lechem tevua chadasha. We're not allowed to eat bread made from new grain before a sacrifice is brought of the new grain in the temple. This is called chadash. Chav gimel shalei lechol kali mina chadash. We cannot even eat toasted grain of the new grain before that sacrifice is brought. Chav dalet shalei lechol karmel mina chadash. Not to eat. Karmel literally means fresh grain of new grain before the appropriate time. Chav hei shalei lechol arla. Not to eat fruit in its first 3 years of growth. Chavav shalei lechol klaya kerem. Not to eat mixtures created in a vineyard. This refers to produce and grape seeds that were planted together or other mixtures. Chav zayin shalei lechol tevel. Not to eat untithed produce. The last 5 mitzvahs or 6 are going to be discussed in chapter 10. Chav ches shalei lishtes yayin nesech. Not to drink wine that was offered to idol worship. That's the literal meaning, but it also has a lot of other connotations in terms of wine that's related to non-Jews. Those are going to be discussed in chapter 11 to 13. And there are 17 chapters. The last 4 chapters deal with rabbinic prohibitions related to non-kosher food. The explanation of all of these 28 mitzvahs are coming in the next 17 days, God willing. The Rambam begins Perek Rishon, chapter 1, Halacha Aleph. Mitzvahs aseh. It's a positive commandment, Leida hasimonin, to know the distinguishing signs, shemavdilin bahen, ben behema v'chaya, v'oif v'dagim v'chagavim, shemuter la'achlan, which we use to distinguish between animals, beasts, birds, fish, locusts that we're allowed to eat, ubein she'ein muter la'achlan, between the ones that we're not allowed to eat. Shenemar, as it says, there are 2 verses. First one says, v'hivdaltem ben behema ha'tohira la'tmeya. You shall differentiate between the kosher and the non-kosher animal, uvein ha'oif hatamei latoher, and between the non-kosher and kosher birds. That's the one that talks about animals and birds. V'nemar, it also says, lahavdil ben hatamei uvein hatoher, to differentiate between the non-kosher and the kosher of all species, uvein hachaya hane'echeles, uvein hachaya asher lo seyachel, between the beast that can be eaten and the beast that cannot. The Rebbe has a very interesting take here, because the Rambam mixes up the order of the verses. If you look in the Chumash, these 2 verses appear in the opposite order. Why does the Rambam bring them out of order? Because we just finished the section of laws of forbidden relationships. The first verse that the Rambam quotes is the verse about kosher that comes right after the verses of forbidden relationships. So the Rambam brings first the verse that matches the order in his book. And based on that, he also is going to define the order in this actual chapter based on that first verse. Talking first about animals, then beasts, then birds. So the Rambam begins. First, animals. Halacha beis. Simane behema v'chaya nisparshu b'Torah. The signs of a kosher animal and a beast are clear in the Torah. Behem shnei simanim, there are 2 signs. See them on the screen. This is a cow, just using it for example. Mafreses parsa umalas geira. Split hooves, and malas geira literally means bringing up the food. We call this chewing its cud. We'll talk about this in detail on a later date, how the animal has 4 stomachs, and the food goes from one stomach to the next, getting processed more and more as it goes into each stomach, and part of the process is regurgitating the food. The animal brings it back up, chews it again, and then brings it back down. That's only unique to kosher animals. Choose the cud, yeah. Ad sheyu shneim, and both of them are required. Split hooves and chewing the cud. Now the Rambam says, there's a couple of tricks that you can use in ascertaining kosher animals. V'chol behema v'chaya shehimalas geira. Any animal or beast that chews its cud, ein la shinayim b'lechi ha'elyon, doesn't have teeth in its upper jaw. This picture that I'm going to show you now is from the Art Scroll Gemara, where they show you the difference between a kosher and non-kosher animal. It's a little bit creepy maybe. On the left is a cow, it's a kosher animal. On the right is a horse. So you can see that while both of them have molars on their upper jaw in the back, but the cow doesn't have any teeth in the front part of its upper jaw. The horse, on the other hand, does. For example, just using an example of a non-kosher animal. So you see here how this is the difference that the Rambam is talking about. It doesn't have teeth in the upper jaw. So that's, right, exactly. That's the first trick you can use. If it chews its cud, it won't have teeth in the upper jaw. Another rule, by default, you must know that any animal that chews its cud will have split hooves. Chutz min hagamal, with the exception of a camel. Exception of a camel, it doesn't have split hooves. It's listed in the Torah as chewing its cud, but not split hooves. The Torah actually lists 2 more, a rabbit and a hare or a hyrax. The reason that Rambam doesn't list them here is because he's talking about animals, not like these little,
like a rabbit chews.
Yeah, little rodents.
Rabbits chew actually a cud, right?
Huh?
Rabbits chew cud.
Yes. The Torah lists them as chewing their cud, but not split hooves. The Rambam doesn't put them here because they're not animals. Now, with the camel, the commentaries also point out that here, this is its upper jaw, and you can see the teeth over there also. So, nevertheless, the Shulchan Aruch doesn't call this proper teeth. It says this is different than the teeth of a horse, let's say. They have like little protrusions, but they're not real teeth. But this one does chew its cud, and it doesn't have split hooves. On the other hand as well, any animal that you see has split hooves, you can know for a fact that it chews its cud, with one exception, chutz min hachazir, except for the pig. The pig is like the classic non-kosher animal. Why?
Quintessential. Right.
Not because it's actually less kosher. In fact, it actually has one of the kosher signs. You have plenty of animals that have none of the kosher signs, but that's exactly why. Because the Midrash says it sticks out its hooves, says, look, I'm kosher. I got split hooves.
Your father
I don't chew my cud.
Your grandfather used to say, like Kohanim used to go stick their hands out like that.
Yes, look at me, I'm kosher. That's what makes the pork so quintessentially not kosher, because it tries to make you think that it's kosher.
But it has a proper split hoof.
But it does, yes. It has a proper split hoof, and so that's the only one that doesn't fit this rule. The Rebbe actually once said, from here, this halacha is one of the examples that we see the eternality and the truth of Torah. This halacha was written thousands of years ago. Science has discovered so much more in the field of zoology, and these rules never change. An animal that chews its cud has split hooves. Split hooves chews its cud. We haven't discovered any new species that has one or the other. Right. Torah stays true forever. So now the Rambam says, Lefichach, therefore, hamoitze behema bamidbar ve'einem akira. You find an animal in the desert and you don't recognize it. Umitzah chatucha saprases. And you find that its feet are cut off. So you can't determine whether it had split hooves or not. Baydek b'fiyah. Check its mouth. In ein la shinayim l'mayla. If it doesn't have teeth in its upper jaw. So we said, any animal that chews its cud doesn't have teeth in its upper jaw. This means that this animal chews its cud. And once you know that it chews its cud, you know that it has split hooves. It's well known that it's actually pure animal, provided you can recognize what a camel looks like, because the camel is the one exception. It's the one exception which will have the signs of chewing its cud, but it will not have split hooves. So as long as you know what a camel looks like, you can go to any other animal in the desert, and by checking its upper jaw, you will know if it's kosher. If you find the opposite, an animal that you don't know, but its mouth is cut off, so there's no way to check whether it chews its cud or not. Check its hooves. If it's completely split, then it's kosher. Why? Because any animal that has split hooves will automatically chew its cud. So long as you recognize what a pig looks like, that's the one exception. Once you know what the exception looks like, everything else fits neatly into the rule. What if you have no way? Its mouth is cut off and its feet are cut off. So now, so the Rambam gives one other sign that you can use, which was received from tradition from the sages. After you slaughter this animal, you can check its tailbone, the meat by its tail. If the grains of its flesh go both lengthwise and widthwise. The commentators explain there's like a little piece of muscle or meat that comes off the tailbone that has, it goes both this way and that way, laterally and vertically. So then, tahira, then it's pure. It's a kosher animal. So long as you can recognize the wild donkey, because its flesh also goes that way, widthwise and lengthwise. Basically, as long as you know the exceptions, you can use the rules to ascertain anything else. Halacha dalir, the Rambam gives us a general rule about kosher animals. If a kosher animal gives birth to what looks like a non-kosher animal, so you have a cow, a mother cow in your herd, it's pregnant. Next day you see a baby horse, what looks like a baby horse, next to it. Even though it's not of split hooves, and it doesn't chew its cud, it looks like a horse or a donkey. For all matters, it's actually permitted to be eaten. This ties into a very big discussion that the Ragachover Gaon famously analyzed. He said, what's the meaning of kosher signs? Are they inherent signs of kosherness? Or they're just signs for you to know that something is kosher? In other words, does the fact that it split hooves and chews its cud, is that what makes it kosher? Or is that what tells you that it's kosher? And this case is the difference. If you have a cow that gives birth to what seems to be a malformed cow, looks like a horse, so if the signs are what inherently makes it kosher, so then too bad. Even though it came from a kosher animal, but it doesn't have the split hooves of chewing its cud, so it's not kosher. But the Rambam rules, no, they're telltale signs of its kosherness. So long as you know that it came from a cow, even if it doesn't have what looks like the kosher signs, it's kosher. When do we say this, however? When the animal gave birth in front of you. You didn't just see the end, you saw the process. But if you left a pregnant cow in your herd, the next day you come and you find a little pig-like creature wrapped around it or following it, even if it's nursing from it. And that's a whole other level, because animals don't typically nurse from other animals if they're not their mother. Areza safek. You didn't see the birth, it's a doubt. The asur ba'achila, it's forbidden to be eaten. Shema min atmea nailad, because maybe the pig was actually born from another pig. The nichrach acharat tahira, and it simply wrapped itself, it simply followed the pure animal. That's if the mother was kosher and the kid looks like it's not kosher. What about the opposite? Behema tmeya sheyalda kamin behema tahira. A non-kosher animal, you have a horse, a mother horse, it's pregnant, and then you see what looks like a cow or a calf next to it. Afal pishu mafrius parso maligera, even though this little calf-like creature is having split hooves and it's chewing its cud, it's doing all the right thing, checks all the boxes, and for every intent and purpose, it's like an ox or a sheep. It's forbidden to be eaten. What grows from an impure animal is impure. What grows from a pure animal is pure. Therefore, some texts don't have the therefore because it's not a direct result. It's a new law about fish. If a non-kosher fish is found in the belly of a kosher fish, asur, it's forbidden. Because a full fish is not being born from another fish. It's obviously swallowed from the outside. The dog tahar hanimtza b'me'ei dog tamei mutar, but a kosher fish that's found in the belly of a non-kosher fish is actually permitted. Because it isn't its offspring, rather it swallowed it. Fish, they have eggs, and the eggs turn into fish. You don't find the full fish in the belly of another fish if it didn't eat it. Halacha vav behema tahira sheyalda. A kosher animal gives birth. Oisha nimtzaba, or a kosher animal is slaughtered and you find inside it beria sheyeshla shtei gabin or shtei shidres. A creature that has two backs and two spinal cords. We call this today Siamese twins. So this is actually a picture of Siamese calf twins. Asura ba'achila. It's actually forbidden to be eaten. Even though it's in the belly of a kosher animal, and it came from a kosher animal, it's forbidden. V'zuhi hashesua shenesra b'Torah. This is the shesua, which the Torah talks about. Torah forbids. Shenemar, as it says, and this is actually a quote in the verse, it says, Ezel loy toichlu, mima lehagera umimafrise haparsa. These are the ones that you should not eat, even though they chew their cud and they have split hooves. The first one on the list is hashesua, the split one. Kiloimar, this means it's a reference to a creature. Beria shenolda shesua l'shtei behemes, an animal that's born kind of divided into two animals. You have this is the Siamese. In other words, it's a kosher animal. Each one on its own technically would chew its cud and have split hooves, but itself is shesua, so it's forbidden.
Why?
It's just on the list.
Yeah, it just
Doesn't fit the logic. Torah lists it clearly, it's forbidden.
survive.
And they probably don't survive for long, it's true. Halacha zayin, v'chein behema shenimtza b'demus oif. Also, if you have a kosher animal, you find inside it what looks like a bird. Afal pishu oif tar, even if it's a kosher bird, you find what looks like a chicken inside of a cow's stomach. Hareza asur ba'achila, it's forbidden to be eaten. Why? We just said anything that's found in a kosher animal is kosher. Lo yuhutar min hanimtza b'behema ela ma sheyesh le parsa. What's found in an animal is only kosher if it has a hoof. If it has what looks like a foot. Like an animal has a foot, not a chicken or a bird. Halacha ches, the Rambam now goes to some specifics. Ein lecha b'chol behema v'chaya sheba'olam. There are no beasts or animals in the world shemutar ba'achila that are permitted to eat, chutz me'aseres haminin hamenuyin b'Torah, except for the 10 kosher types listed in the Torah. That's how the Torah goes. In the Torah you have a list of the kosher animals, everything else is not. Shleisha mine behema, 3 types of what's called domesticated animals. Behem, sher, sev, ve'ez, the ox, the sheep, and the goat. Veshiva mine chaya, and the 7 types of beasts. And the 7 types of beasts are clearly in a verse, the Rambam quotes them now, Ayol utzvi v'yachmur, ve'akoy v'dishain uta'oy v'zamer. It's a big argument as to what these animals are. I consulted yesterday in preparing 3 different authoritative translations. So here they are. On the right, you have the Kahas Chumash, the Chabad Chumash. They say that Ayol is a deer, a classic deer. Tzvi is a gazelle. Even though we're used to, in Talmudic literature, a tzvi is a deer and an ayol is a gazelle. They say the opposite. They say ayol is a deer, tzvi is a gazelle. Yachmur, so the yachmur, they say it's the fallow deer. Others translate the yachmur as the antelope. That's the yachmur over there. All right?
So what category is those? Did you say?
These are beasts, kosher beasts.
Chayes.
Chayas, yeah.
You get them in South Africa, they're called springboks.
What, the general category?
No, that particular, like, very similar to that what you put the dot on.
This one here, the antelope?
Yeah, you get those in plenty of them.
Plenty of
Tons all over
safaris.
the place, yeah, so I'm just saying it's,
Right.
those are kosher, they're fully
have
kosher,
elk.
but you have to have
The akoy is the ibex, pretty universally accepted. Got these really round and notched horns.
Right.
The dishoin is a argument. These one, the Kahas Chumash says it's the adax. Is that how it's pronounced? Adax?
Yeah.
Not really sure. These rounded horns. But others say it's the shami. It's a funny name. It's spelled chamois, but it's pronounced shami.
Chamois.
Like the shamu in SeaWorld? Not exactly, but this. Huh? Shami? A shami.
Right.
I thought it's a shami. No?
No, chamois is the skin is used to clean like cars after you wash them. It's really
Oh,
good.
okay. There you go.
Yeah, chamois leather.
But I
Chamois leather. Okay.
chamois
See, I told you.
leather, yeah.
I knew you guys would be helpful. The ta'oi, so the Kahas Chumash translates it as the bison. And the zomer, they say, is wild sheep. This one here with the big horns. The Radak, Rab David Kimchi, he says that it's a giraffe. Zomer is a giraffe. It's a myth, by the way, that a giraffe is not, can't be eaten because we don't know where to slaughter it. That's a myth, total myth. The whole neck is kosher for slaughtering, so we know how to.
It's probably just in practice.
There's more room, but I've heard that it's just tough meat, so it wouldn't sell properly. It doesn't have good meat. Anyway, these are the 7 beasts. Haim uminehem, them and all of the members of their family, different species. Kigayin sherd habar v'hamiri, a wild ox. Miri seems to be accepted that it means buffalo. Shehin mimin hashar, which are all members of the ox family. These are the only 10 kosher animals and beasts. V'chala asara mininu minehem, all these 10 types and their subspecies. Male geiro mafris parsa, they all have the kosher signs. They chew their cud, they split hooves. Lefichach, therefore, mishahu makiran, anybody who recognizes these animals, ein tzarich livda. You don't even have to check. Loi bapev v'loi baraglayim, not mouth or feet. You know this is a bison. You know this is a wild deer. You just go get it and eat it because you know it's kosher. Afal pisha kulan mutarin ba'achila, very important distinction. Even though all of these animals that we just listed are all kosher for eating, tzrichin anu lahavdil ben behema tahira v'chaya tahira. We have a mitzvah to differentiate between kosher domesticated animals and kosher beasts, undomesticated animals. Why? For this reason. Oh, here's the verses of the animals. For this reason. Shahachaya, the kosher beast, chelba mutar, all of its fats are permitted to be eaten. B'dama ton kisa, and upon slaughtering, you have to cover its blood, like we do for birds. And the day before Yom Kippur, you shech the chicken for kaparas. You have to cover the blood. It's a special mitzvah. That also applies to the blood of a chaya, of a kosher beast. So, permitted fats, you must cover the blood. The habehema hatahira, but a kosher domesticated animal, a cow or a goat, chelba bekares, its fats are forbidden on pain of excision. So the complete opposite, the ein damaton kisoy, and its blood doesn't have to be covered. So it's the complete opposite. So although they're both kosher, you have to know what's a behema, what's a chaya for these reasons. Halacha yod v'simane chaya mipi ashmu ahen. The signs of a kosher beast, not domesticated animal, the beast, came from oral tradition. In other words, there's going to be additional signs. Kol min shehu mafris parsa umale geira. First of all, it has to be a type that has split hooves and chews its cud, like an animal. But there's a special, unique sign for the beasts. The yesh le karnayim mifutzales. It has branched horns. Kigoyin ha'ayol. And here's where you see that ayol probably means a deer, because the antlers of a deer are very much branched off. Don't have a good picture here. Oh, that's surprising. I should have prepared a picture of a deer. But bottom line is, maybe this is it. Oh, here's a deer. There you go. This is a little horns of a deer before they branch off to proper antlers. But the point is, you can see they actually branch. Then it's for sure a kosher beast. Now, if it doesn't have branched antlers, there's another way to determine with the horns. If its horns were kruchais, like an ox. So this is an ox's horns. There's a debate what kruchais means. Some say it means rounded. See how they're rounded like this? They're not straight up. Others say kruchais means layered. The animal horns, they have layers of keratin, one over the other, like an onion. That's what kruchos means. Either that or this. V'charukos kekarne ha'ez, if they're notched, grooved, like a goat's horns. This is a goat's horns, you can see. It's full of little indentations, little marks. V'yiyah hacherek muvla bahen, and the notches have to be indented. So it can't be notched in which it's bumpy, and then the notch is coming through the bumps. It has to be indented into the actual horn. Vahaduros kekarne hatzvi, or they're spiraled, like the horns of a tzvi. So here you see tzvi as a gazelle, because if you look at the gazelle, these are a gazelle's horns on the right. See how they're spiraled? They go up nicely, and they come out. This is a European roebuck. Also, some say this is the tzvi. See its horns? Kind of coming up.
Distinction between a chaya and a behemoth?
No, this is in chaya itself. So the Rambam is saying if you have branched off antlers, that's a for sure kosher. If you don't have the branch off, so check for these three signs. If they're rounded or layered, or if they're notched, or if they're spiraled, harezu chaya tahira, that's a kosher beast. Ubilvad sheyiyeh bakarnayim shloisha simaron ilo. They have to have those three signs: kruchais, charukais, vahadurais. Layered or rounded, notched, grooved, spiral. Yud aleph bamed dvarim amurim. When do we say this? That you have to start looking for the horns and examining it. B'min she'enei makirai. It's if a type of animal that you don't recognize. Aval shiva minei chaya ha'amurin b'Torah, but the 7 species of chaya that are listed clearly in the Torah. Im haya makirai, if you knew them, if you were a hunter, you recognized them. Afilu le'matzah le'karnayim, even if you didn't find any horns on the animal, shed its horns or it was cut off. Hareza oichel chelbay. You can treat it as a chaya. You can eat its fats. The chaya of lechas is dama, and you have to cover its blood when you shecht it, because you know that these signs are there for a case of doubt. But if you know, then you know.
When they say eat these fats, they're talking about the sciatic.
No, we'll see in chapter 7. It's a whole list of specific fats near the flanks, on top of the intestines, a ganze maisa, lesser amentum, greater amentum, a ganze thing. Yud beis shor habar, the wild ox, min behemahu, is a type of domesticated animal. It goes into the category of behema. The hakeresh and the keresh, it's unknown what this is. Afal pi she'ein le'al keren achas, even though it only has one horn. The unicorn is not a myth, you see? It's a real deal. It only has one horn. Harehu chaya. It's considered in the category of a wild beast. V'chol she'yistapik lecha, im hu min chaya min behema. Whenever you are in doubt as to whether something is a type of beast or domesticated animal, you got to use both stringencies. Chel by asur, you cannot eat its forbidden fats, or the equivalent of the forbidden fats in a regular animal. The ain like in Allah, but if you did eat it, we wouldn't give you lashes because maybe it's a beast and the flats are permitted. Umechasen as dama, and you have to also, out of doubt, cover its blood when you slaughter it. Says the Rambam Yud Gimel Kilayim, a hybrid, haba mi behema tahira im chaya tahira, which comes from breeding together a kosher behema and a kosher chaya. So what is it now? Domesticated or a beast? Says the Rambam hua nikra koi. That's called a koi. Chel by asur, same thing. It has both stringencies. Its fats are forbidden. The ain like in a love, but you don't get lashes if you eat it. Umechasen es dama, and you have to cover its blood when you slaughter it. The ain min tamei misaber min tahar klal. Fascinating rule. A non-kosher species cannot be impregnated by a kosher species. They will not mate. And even if they do, it won't result in anything, in any birth. So therefore...
Horses are known to get very uncomfortable on elephants.
Well, they're both non-kosher. You can breed 2 non-kosher animals, you can breed 2 kosher animals. But the kosher and the non-kosher, they'll never breed. So that is the end of the discussion of the animals. Now we move to the birds. Says the Rambam Yudalit, Simone oif tahar lo nisparish min haTorah. When it comes to the birds, there's no clear signs of a pure bird in the Torah. So versus the animals, the Torah lists the kosher ones, everything else is not kosher. With the birds, it's the opposite. We don't have any signs for a kosher bird. Elamana minyan tmeim bilvat. All the Torah does is it counts the list of the non-kosher birds. Ushar minei ha'oif mutar, and everything else is meant to be permitted. Now we'll soon see that we don't really know what these types are, so it's complicated to say everything is permitted. We say everything is forbidden unless we have a tradition. The types that are forbidden in the Torah are 24 species of bird. The Eluhain, and they are the following. The Rambam lists these, and again I consulted 3 different translations for what these birds are. I've done my best to get you pictures of them all, and we'll see how they look. We start with the Nesher. Nesher,
Eagle.
Well, the common translation is the eagle. However, according to many, it's actually not the eagle. It's the griffon vulture. See this guy?
Yeah.
Pretty scary bird. That's the Nesher. The Peres, that's number 2. Peres is translated as the ossifrage. Basically a bearded vulture. Okay, these are all different types. This is a lammergeier. Look at him.
Osprey is not a vulture.
No, that's coming soon. This is the ossifrage. Ossifrage, lammergeier, bearded vulture. These are 3 types of birds that are identified with the Peres. So this is the biggest argument here. Okay? Then you have the Aznia. The Aznia is the osprey. That's this one.
It's a type of hawk, an ocean-going hawk.
A real bird of prey. Okay? Then you have the Da'a, Vihi Hara'a, Ha'amura b'Mishneh Torah. The 4th bird is called the Da'a or the Ra'a. The non-kosher birds are listed twice in the Torah. One of them in the book of Vayikra, one of them in the book of Devarim. Once it's called Da'a, once it's called Ra'a. This is universally translated as the kite. But in the kite, there are different species, so the one I chose is the black one. This is the black kite. And he's also a bird of prey. Then you have the Aya, Vihi Hadaya, Ha'amura b'Mishneh Torah. The Aya / the Daya. And that is, hey, I'm missing a picture here. This is the vulture. Okay, I just put it up. I guess a bunch of types of vultures. And then you have the Minha Aya, all members of the vulture family. Shekain Kasuv Ba Lemina, because by the vulture it says to its type. Niklal Shu Shnei Minin, which means that there's multiple species. So number 5 and 6 are all members of the vulture family. Number 7 is the Oirev. Oirev is classically translated as the raven, but more specifically the crow. This guy. The black guy. Then you have the Zarzir. Number Ches, the Zarzir is the starling. That's how most translate the Zarzir. Now the Zarzir is not listed in the Torah. In the Torah, all it says, Shekei Nemar Ba'oirev Leminoi. It says, all crows are forbidden to their species, which means Lahavi Es HaZarzir. That includes the species related to this crow, which is the starling, as almost all translations understand it. Then you have number 9 is the Yana. Yana is the ostrich, again universally accepted as a translation. Yud is the Tachmas. Tachmas, an argument. Some say it's a classic owl, some say it's the cuckoo. Cuckoo. This guy. Kukuriku. Look at him. He's waiting to catch somebody.
Yeah, he's for sure cuckoo.
Then you have number 11.
Funny sound.
Yud Aleph is the Shachaf. Shachaf translates as the gull, but it's a seagull, classically.
Common bird.
Yes, very common bird nowadays. Even in modern Hebrew, Shachaf is a name for seagulls.
See them around those garbage dumps a lot.
Yeah, and on the beach.
On the beach, yeah.
You see them on the beach.
In the middle of the junior highs I went to.
Then Yud Beis, 12 is the Nates. Rashi says it's the sparrow hawk. Specific type of hawk. This is a regular hawk. Definitely a hawk of some type, okay? That's the
family,
Nates.
Yeah, just he says in the Torah the whole family.
Oh, but then it says the Nates and the family. So whenever it says the family, we include another one. So the Rambam says Yud Gimel v'Sharnaka. Sharnaka, for whom min ha-Nates, is a type of hawk. Shekin kasuv b'Limineu, because it says its type. The Sharnaka is a debate whether it's a goshawk, that's this guy, or the shrike. Because in the Talmud it says that the Sharnaka, it gives like a specific type of, it gives a specific label to its character, which is today associated with this guy, the shrike. Okay. Number 14, the kois. Kois is either a falcon or a screech owl. Because in the Torah, it's there twice. And one time it's paired with birds that sound like owls, other times it's paired with other birds. So that's how the argument came about. One says it's a falcon, one says it's a screech owl. Then you have the shalach. This is universally accepted, the cormorant. This is a guy that dives deep into the ocean and catches fish. That actually, the Talmud gives that description. Shayla dagim min hayam, it draws fish from the sea. The word shalach literally means throws itself down. You ever watch them? They fly, then they go, they swoop, they dive.
It's here to eat them, but it's not like falconry. The art of falconry are to raise these animals. Is that a problem?
Depends on in which context. That's a separate thing. But eating is for sure forbidden.
Right, we know that. But
Then you have, let's go back there. Number 16, the yanshuf. Again, this is another bird that's either paired with the owls or birds. So some say it's an ibis. That's this white little guy. Some say it's a barn owl. This cutie. Then we have a tinshemes. And this I found fascinating because most opinions understand this to mean an owl or a bat. Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan in the Living Torah, he says that tinshemes is a swan. Because this is interesting because classically swans are thought to be kosher, not non-kosher. He puts them in the list of the non-kosher animals. Yeah.
Duck's kosher if it's shechted properly.
Of course.
Yeah.
But he says the swan is forbidden. But most opinions say Tinshemes is an owl or a bat. Then we have the ka'os. Ka'os is number 18,
In China,
the pelican. Ka'os is the pelican. This is the guy that has the huge bottom of the beak. Ever seen them swallow like full birds alive? It's insane to watch them eat it. Yutes is the rachama, or elsewhere in Torah what's called racham. This is a machlekes, whether it's the magpie or the roller. Because the Talmud says that the racham has also a very unique feature. The roller, when you watch it, it's called the roller because when it flies, it doesn't fly straight, it tumbles through the sky, which seems to match the Talmudic identification for the racham. But either way, it's one of the classic commentators on the Chumash say that it's the magpie. Chaf is the chasida, that's the stork, universally accepted translation. Yeah. Chaf Aleph is the anafa, also widely accepted as the heron, or the heron. How do you pronounce it? The heron. And then you have Chaf Beis.
Very tall.
Yes.
Very tall.
Minha anafa, the heron family. Shekein nemar balimina, because it says to its type. Chav Gimel haduchi fas. The duchi fas is generally assumed to be the hoopoe. Hoopoe. Why?
It's from South Africa.
Because the Talmud says.
Make a sound. Whoop, 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 like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There you go. The Talmud says that the karbaltoi, the top of the duchifas,
Crown.
folds into itself, which is what this thing does. This is a hoopoe as it's open, but then when it rests like flat, looks like it's, yeah. And finally, Chabdala da Atalef, most authorities agree that we don't know what this is. But some say it's the bat. So I put the bat again because
It's not a bird.
some say it's the bat. I know, but that's Atalef is the most obscure of these birds.
I mean, most birds give life. I mean, most birds lay eggs. These don't lay eggs.
No.
So it's a
That's why it's hard to say that it's part of the, yeah. Halacha Tezvav, Kol Misha Baki B'minin Elu Bishmai Sehen. Originally, here's the way it used to work. Anybody who was expert in these types and their names, he could eat any bird that wasn't of those lists. The Eine Tzarich Bedika, with no need for checking, because he's a bird guy. He knows what's a good bird and what's not. The Oif Tahar Nechal B'Masayres. Additionally, a pure kosher bird could be eaten based on tradition, even if you're not a familiar bird farmer, but you know in your family or in your community they've always been eating this bird, that can be assumed to be a kosher bird. For hu sheyiyah, what does it mean tradition? It means should be davar pashut. It's a common understanding that this is a kosher bird in this place. V'nemon sayad loymar, a Jewish hunter can tell us, she's believed to say, oif zeh hitir li Rebbe hatzayad. My teacher, my hunter teacher, told me that this bird is kosher, and we believe him. So long as that hunter teacher is also assumed to be expert in what the birds are kosher or not kosher. And that's only in the olden times when people used to know them, very familiar with them. What if you don't recognize them, you don't know the names? So now the sages in the Talmud gave us some identifying signs. They check the following signs provided by the sages. Any bird that pounces and eats, then it's for sure non-kosher. Now, pounces and eats is itself a huge controversy as to what that means. The Rambam, I'm going to go with the Rambam's interpretation. In his commentary to the Mishnah, he writes that it means, I don't have a picture of it. He writes that it means an animal that eats while its claws are dug into its prey. But it's 2 points, because some say it means it attacks with its claws. No, this means it doesn't matter how it attacks. When it eats with its claws dug in. And I've seen videos of this, it's fascinating. You see these hawks or these birds, they sit on the bird that they're eating, and they eat from them as they're sitting. That's the Deiris Va'ichel according to the Rambam. Now, if it doesn't eat its prey that way, that's a negative sign. That's a sign to say non-kosher. If you don't have that sign, if it does have one of the following 3 signs, Hareza oif tar, this is a positive sign for kosher birds. Ve'eluhain, they are the following. Etzba yesera, an extra claw. So here's a chicken. You can see this actually on the back. Besides for its claws in the front, it has an extra claw in the back. Which, by the way, this is the reason why most authorities say that a nesher is not an eagle. Because the eagle also has a back claw. Unlike the griffon vulture, which is the non-kosher bird, doesn't have a back claw. The eagle has a back one. That's one of the reasons why they say it's actually not the nesher. But either way, this is supposed to be a kosher sign. An extra claw in the back. Now it's called extra, not because it's extra, but because they actually draw it over here. You can see it's not on the same level as the other three. It's raised. See that? So because it's raised, that's a kosher sign. Oy zefek vihi hamura, or it has a crop. A crop, this is the crop over here in the chicken. It's an extra muscle in the esophagus. So in the food pipe, this little part of the stomach distended forward, that's the crop. Only kosher birds have the crop. Oy shahaya kurkivanoi niklaf bayad, or its gizzard is peelable by hand. Here's the gizzard. It's the end of the stomach. Also an additional muscle only found in kosher birds if it's peelable by hand. It also has in other non-kosher birds where you take it out, and if you can peel the membrane off by hand, that's how pliable it is, it's a kosher bird. Now, why did the sages rely on these signs? It says that Rambam, Lafi she'ein b'chol elu haminin ha'asurin, in none of the 24 forbidden types, there is not any bird, min she'enei doires, v'yesh by echad b'shleisha simanin elu. There's no type of a bird that doesn't eat with its claws dug in, and it does have one of the positive kosher signs, chutz mi peres ve'ozniya, except for the ossifrage and the osprey. And those are very rare. Uperes ve'ozniya einan mitzuyin b'yishuv, they're not found in the settled places. Ela b'midberais iye hayam ha'rechaykes ad ma'od, only in the very far deserts and islands, shein soif ha'yishuv, at the ends of the settled portion of the earth, and therefore we could rely on any other bird that fits these classifications and not worry that you're going to come across an osprey or a ossifrage. Yudches haya hakurkavan niklaf besakin ve'ene niklaf bayad. What if the gizzard could be peeled with a knife, but not with a hand? Ve'en by siman acher, and it has no other sign. Afal pishe ene deiris, even if it isn't pouncing, it doesn't eat with its claws dug in. Harez a suffix, it's still a doubt. It's a doubt. Does it mean peelable by hand or peelable with a knife? Haya chazak v'davek. What if it was a very tough membrane, a very sticky membrane to the gizzard? V'hi nichei bashemesh v'nisrapa v'niklaf bayad. Left it in the sun. It's softened because of the sun, and now it's peelable by hand. Hareza mutter, it's allowed. And I saw a video of this when I was in Australia. One of our teachers, he loved these stuff, this type of discussions. He did a whole bunch of research on this stuff, and he tested one of these gizzards from one of these birds, where originally it's very sticky. You leave it out in the heat, then you can actually peel it with your hand. So there are birds like this. So the Rambam says that's actually permitted. Amru ha-ge'oinim, the ge'oinim who lived after the Talmudic era, they said, Shemaseiras hi biyadeyim, it's a tradition in their hands, she'ein moidin lahatir oif haba b'siman echad. If a bird only has one positive sign going for it, we never allow it to be eaten, elohim haya oisei siman sheyikalef kurkavanei bayad, unless that sign is the peelable gizzard. That's the only individual sign that goes on its own. Avalim einei niklef bayad, but if the gizzard is not peelable by hand, afal pisha yesh leizefek oy etz bayesera, even if it has a crop or the additional claw, me'olam lohi tiruhu, the go'inim never permitted this bird to be kosher. Here's another sign. Kol oif shechelek esraglav, any bird that splits its claws, kishemoischin leichut, when you give it a string to settle on, if it splits its claws, shtayim lekan or shtayim lekan, two here and two there, oisha koilit min ha'avir va'oichel ba'avir, or it catches prey mid-air and will eat while it's flying, hareza deiris v'tamid, that's a pouncing bird, it's a bird of prey, and it's non-kosher. V'chal ha'sheichim atmeim, v'nidme lahem hareza tameh. Any bird that dwells, that lives with non-kosher birds, and looks like them, how do they say it? If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck, right? So if it lives with the non-kosher birds and it acts like them, it's probably non-kosher. Now we've done with birds, let's move on to locusts. Just a couple of short halachot and then one more for fish as well. Mine chagavim shehitira Torah. The types of locust which the Torah permitted, shmoina ve'eluhein. There are 8 types, and they are the following. Chagav. We have the white locust. And the min chagav, v'hu harazbanis. The subspecies of the white locust family, called the razbanis. Then you have chargoil. What's chargoil? The spotted gray locust. Then you have the spotted gray locust. Umin chargoil v'hu artzuvia. the spotted gray locust family, which is the Artsuvia. We don't know what exactly it is. Then you have the Arbe. Arbe is either the red locust, or this is actually fascinating. It's called the Schistocerca gregaria in Latin. This is the one type of locust identified by the Yemenite communities, which they eat till this day. They eat this till this day. Yes, they have a Maseret to eat this. They even brought it to, there's a video, they brought it to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, he talks about it. But they will eat this till today. This is the one type. The Arbe, they say they know what this red locust is, and that's permitted. Umin Arbe vihi tzipaides kramim. Then you have the red locust family, which is called the vineyard tzipaides. We don't know what this is. That's definitely part of the red locust. Then you have the salam. Salam is the yellow locust. There it is. Yellow locust. Umin salam vihi yechana Yerushalmis, as well as the salam family, yellow locust family, called the Jerusalemite Yochana. We don't know what that is, but that's the bottom line. Chav Beis, Misha hu baki bahenu bishmeiseyan, same as the birds. Anybody who is expert in these 8 types of locust and their names, oichel, he can eat them. The hatzayad neman alein ka'oif, a hunter is believed to say this is kosher, it's not kosher, like by the birds. Umisha ene baki bahen, if you don't know their names or their types, baidik basiman, and you can use the signs that Torah gives us for locusts. Ushleisha siman yeshban, they have 3 signs. Kol sheyesh le arba raglayim, first of all it has 4 legs. The arba knafayim, 4 wings that cover most of its length and most of its circumference. It has 2 additional legs that are meant for jumping. These things in the back here, you see? The jumpers. That's a kosher type of locust. Even though it has an elongated head and it has a tail. Tail is a commonly understood as the ovipositor. That's where it releases its eggs from. Yes. If its name was Chagav, that's what it's called. It's kosher. You can rely on it. If a locust doesn't have right now wings or hopping legs, or right now it doesn't have wings that cover most of its circumference and its length. But it's just small. It's going to grow these legs later or these wings later. It's permitted right now, even though it's not here right now because it's going to grow soon. That is the locust, and as I said before, only the Yemenites eat locusts. Today it's accepted that we don't eat locusts at all. We don't know what they are. The final halacha for today, the Rambam deals with fish. Fish are easy. Uvadagim shnei simanim. With fish there are 2 signs. Snapir v'kaskeses, fins and scales. Usnapir husha pereach. By the word snapir is the one that it uses to swim. The kaskeses hiadvuka b'chol guvay. The scales are what stuck to its entire body, and that's the kosher signs. V'chol sheyesh le kaskeses yesh le snapir. We have a rule: if a fish has scales, it for sure has fins. Ein le achshav ukesheyagdil yiyalai. If it doesn't have scales right now, but when it's going to grow up, it's going to have scales. Or it has scales when it's in the sea. But the moment it leaves the water, it sheds all of its scales. That's permitted. If a fish doesn't have scales that are covering its entire body, it's still permitted. Even if it's only 1 fin, 1 scale, that is a kosher fish.